Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be doing a video about the Irish potato famine and how I think it was a parasite or some sort of disease came over to Ireland from, I think, the US actually, and meant that there were no more potatoes that could actually be eaten safely. And with Ireland being so dependent on potatoes at this point, they lost a lot of their main food source. Anyway, this will probably be quite a short video. Anyway, let's get on with the video.
The Irish Potato Famine, 1845 through 1852. In 1845, in Ireland, the potato crops were failing and potato plants were turning black and rotten.
So this can happen for a number of reasons, but mostly for parasite or disease.
The cause was potato blight, or more specifically the fungus Phytophthora infestans, caused by the wind, rain, and insects. It spread throughout Europe, but hit Ireland the hardest. This would be known as the Great Famine, or the Great Hunger.
And has actually affected the population so much that there is actually still a population deficit to this day.
By 1845, the potato, which was originally brought into Ireland by the landed gentry, was Ireland's most important crop. Almost half of Ireland's population, mainly the rural poor, were dependent on potatoes to live. The average
Now, the richer could get theirs imported from elsewhere or didn't have to rely on potatoes at this point and could eat other things, while the poorer, more rural areas, they were solely reliant on them, and actually most families didn't eat anything but potatoes or the little stock that they actually had.
14 pounds of potatoes a day. They grew well in Ireland's climate, and even in poor soil and in wet and cold conditions. Potatoes were nutritious.
Yeah, potatoes are nutritious and actually quite healthy depending on why, when, and how you're eating them. And as well, they were potatoes can grow virtually anywhere, which actually means they worked well in a lot of climates which didn't facilitate very much growing, such as Ireland at this point.
A great source of vitamin C, and their harvest was plentiful, so there was enough to feed families, and farmers had enough surplus to feed their livestock. The Irish were overly reliant on one variety of potato called the Irish lumper.
Yeah, I don't think they exist much anymore.
This lack of variation put Ireland at high risk of mass famine. When blight hit the potato plant, it may look edible from the outside, but it was a slimy pulp inside. It would soon appear rotten and shriveled once the fungal spores settled on the plant, which spread to healthy potato plants around it.
So yeah, again, at this point, with a lot of Europe had a lot of potato plants, but weren't as reliant on them. I'm not much of a food historian, but I know a lot about the Irish potato famine because it actually affected way more people than it gives it credit for, and killed thousands upon thousands of people from then.
Through the breeze. The smell
and actually still sometimes affects crops to this day.
Was so revolting that it could make a person vomit, and eating an infected potato would leave them in agony.
And could kill them, actually. So they weren't just dying from starvation, they were also dying from eating them. And if each family was eating 14 pounds of potatoes a day, imagine how much if they ate that much a day and some infected ones.
One of the sources for the blight may have been the United States. Arriving through ships coming to Europe, a strain of blight was seen in 1843 on America's eastern seaboard, but going further back, the pathogen could be traced to Mexico. Great Britain had the richest empire in the world at this time, and had an oppressive rule over Ireland.
And actually, at this point, we didn't help them. So one of the reasons why Ireland hates Britain so much is because we didn't help them at all. And it means that actually the longest-standing rivalry is from this point.
First year of the famine, there was little death from hunger. British Prime Minister Sir Robert Peel imported corn or maize from the United States. However, there weren't enough mills to ground it, and the poor couldn't afford it. As well as this, the Irish peasants' diet of potatoes made the corn unsatisfactory. Unlike potatoes, it lacked vitamin C, so dependence on corn resulted in scurvy.
Yeah.
While some Irish got used to the cornmeal, there was not enough to go around. Surprisingly, even as things got worse, grain and other foods were still being exported to Great Britain during the famine. Lord John Russell took power as Prime Minister.
So yeah, we didn't actually do anything to help them. In fact, we probably made it worse, because what we didn't do is actually stop them from... If we had made them give us less food and have them give them... and have them have the food that they grow themselves, they probably wouldn't be so much of a problem as it was. But with the fact that we still wanted our grain, we actually got it. And I hate Peel, honestly, I hate
June
Peel.
1846, and formed a Whig government. It took a laissez-faire approach, which meant
Which basically means they did nothing.
minimal government involvement in the economics of Ireland. The British government looked down upon the Irish as less than human, and their potato crops as lazy, suggesting that they needed to unlearn dependency on the government. The Protestant evangelical belief that the famine was an act of providence, a divine judgment, also justified inaction. Charles Trevelyan, a civil servant with direct responsibility for the government's handling of the famine, was a big supporter of this idea. The British government opened soup kitchens in 1847, which fed over 3 million starving Irish
But there was still a large amount of people which weren't being fed.
peasants, but they closed them down after 6 months. They also continued to export food that could have fed the starving Irish population, as they did not want to interfere in the business of the English landowners. Public work schemes were also introduced to provide employment, but malnourishment made hard labor extremely difficult for...
And it also meant that they would die on the job from lack of nutrition. And as well, a lot in these cases, it was the British who were making them work.
workers. Most of the Irish were Catholics, and half did not own the land they worked on. Instead, they were renting and working on tiny plots of land for English landowners, many who were absentee landlords who lived in Britain, not Ireland. Because of the famine, Irish peasants fell behind on their rents and were evicted. Their houses were often demolished to prevent them coming back. Many went to the overcrowded workhouses, where disease like typhoid was rampant.
Which then killed more, and as a result, more and more died. I think it was up to 1 million that actually died in the end from this one disease, which caused the potatoes to die out. This happens a lot when when a country is reliant on a single food or a single species of that food.
As well as death from starvation, famine-related diseases killed many of those suffering, a cause of a weakened immunity from malnutrition. Those that were evicted from the lands and had nothing to eat could be seen dying or dead in ditches along roads. Many committed crimes, stealing food or trying to get caught.
So this is actually very similar to what happened in Russia at the time, where Russia lost all their wheat, and Russia was also very much reliant on wheat at this time, and the government also did nothing. So you can make parallels between the Great Russian Famine and the Irish potato famine. So you can kind of make quite a few parallels, which means you can compare.
On purpose, in an attempt to be sent to jail or a penal colony like Australia, where they might be fed. By the time the potato crops recovered in 1852, 1 to 2 million Irish left the homeland and emigrated, some to Britain and many to North America, where many died on the coffin ships during the journey from hunger and disease. The Irish refugees that reached the east coast of the United States established themselves in cities like Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, and Baltimore.
And that's also why there's actually a large Irish population in them sort of areas.
The Great Famine was one of the worst times in Irish history and left 1 million dead. The Irish population had dramatically declined, with 1/4 dead or emigrated, spurring a century-long population decline.
And actually, Ireland has not recovered.
Subscribe for more history videos.
Anyway, that's the end of the video. That was incredibly short. So I'll see you in the next video, I guess. And bye.